This video recaps the most important parts of class from today, Tuesday, January 11th, 8th grade honors math. The first thing you want to do to make up today's classwork is click on the ClassKick link and make sure you're signing in with Google. I'm not going to do that because I don't have a student account, but don't do what I do. Click on Login with Google. So the first thing we did today was a do now, which I would like you to make up because we practiced the distributive property. Let me show you an example. We discussed how when we have 5, a factor, something we're multiplying times the terms inside our parentheses, we can distribute 5 to both terms inside of those parentheses. And so we know 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times 2y is 10y. And so we can change our distributed form to our expanded form. We could do the same thing in 8 times 4x equals y by multiplying 8 times 4x, which is equal to 32x. And then we can multiply 8 times y, which is just 8y. I want you to go ahead and pause this video and complete the rest of the boxes on this slide. So your directions are to pause the video and complete the rest of slide 1. Okay, at this point, you should have completed slide 1. If you haven't, pause the video again and come back to it when you're finished. On slide 2, you'll see today's learning target, describing multiple strategies to solve the same equation, and our agenda. The first thing we did was return to lesson 3. In lesson 3, we talked about Noah and Lynn's solution to this equation, 14a equals 2 times a minus 3. We discussed how Noah's solution and Lynn's solution were different. You don't need to do anything on this slide, just follow along with the video here. Noah and Lynn made a different choice about how to solve for these equations. Noah decided to distribute, just like in the do now, his 2. And so he ended up with 2a, because 2 times a is 2a, and negative 6, because 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. In contrast, Lynn decided to divide both sides of her equation by 2. When she divided the left side by 2, 14 divided by 2 is 7a. And when she divided the right side by 2, the 2's canceled out. Either way, their explanation is correct and their final answer is correct. One way to summarize this is Noah and Lynn both solved the equation, but they used different steps. And we can tell this is true in part because they both ended up with a equals negative 1/2, which is the correct solution. Now, when we think about moving from one line to the next of an equation, we can identify the steps that are being taken. For example, Noah's first step here was to distribute 2. And that was a way of simplifying the first line of the equation. Then we can see that on the second line of the equation, Noah subtracted 2a. And we can tell that that's true because 2a went away. There's no more 2a. And 14a became 12a. And then finally, we can see that his last step was to divide both sides by 12. And again, we can tell that that's the case because a just became a on its own, and negative 6 divided by 12 is negative 1/2. You're going to be asked to identify steps this way on slide 5, which is the next place you need to go. Your directions are to pause the video and complete slide 5, which is the exit ticket from lesson 3. So pause the video and complete slide 5. Okay, so you should have completed slide 5 in your ClassKick, and the next thing we worked on was slide 6. In slide 6, you're asked, which of these equations have the same solution as equation A? Equation 1. Remember that solution, that phrase solution, means that x is equal to the same value. So x has the same value. So for which equation does x have the same value? I would like you to pause this video and try slide 6. So there are multiple correct answers to this problem, and there's a few ways that you could have thought of it. The first way to think of it is you could find the solution to the equation. So I know that I have x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. Let's see if I can type this to stay a little bit neater. Let's say that I decide to add 3 to both sides of my equation. If I add 3 to both sides, I end up with x is equal to 5 minus 4x. Now, I can add 4x to both sides of my equation, plus 4x and plus 4x, because then I end up with x, 5x is equal to 5. And I know that I can divide both sides by 5 for x equals 1. So the solution to my equation, and you can imagine that I was drawing neat lines underneath each of these steps, which is always how we ideally would want to be doing it. The solution to my equation is x equals 1. And so for any of these other equations, if x equals 1 makes the equation true, then we know that that's a valid solution. So for example, if I said 2 times 1 minus 6 is equal to 4 minus 8 times 1, if this is true, if x can equal 1 and this equation can be true, then I know they have the same solution. Well, I know 2 minus 6 is equal to 4 minus 8, and 2 minus 6 is negative 4, which is equal to negative 4. So I know that these equations have the same solution, and equation A is the same, has the same solution as equation 1. Now, another way you could think of this is, can you change the original equation, x minus 3 is equal to 2 minus 4x, to look exactly the same as the new equation? So for example, in equation B, if I simply subtracted 2 from both sides of my original equation, I would end up with x is equal, or I should say x minus 5 is equal to negative 4x. Notice how if I do the same exact thing to the original equation being x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x, if I subtract 2 from both sides, I end up with x minus 5 is negative 4x, which is equation B. And so I know that equation B is identical to equation A. Now, in this problem, the correct answer is that all 4 equations have a solution of x is negative 1. And you could prove that using either strategy, using the strategy in this first box where we subtracted x, where we substituted x for 1. Substituted means we just plugged in 1 for x. Or you could do it how we did equation B, where we did the same thing to both sides of the equation to prove that it was equivalent. Either strategy works. Now, the last 2 slides that we completed during class were slides 7 and 8. And in slides 7 and 8, you're looking at the way that a few people solved this same equation, and you're determining whether or not the equations are true. So you're examining the steps. So your final step in class today is to complete slides 7 and 8. When you are finished, make sure that you are caught up with the Monday classwork. That is the only homework for tonight. If you have any questions, make sure that you just send me an email so that we can be sure you're caught up for class on Wednesday.